G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talks Off. The Korean 2030 movement. Nowhere else in the world is masculinity more under attack than South Korea. South Korean women have fallen under and hard for radical feminism, for Marxist doctrine. They want to destroy not just the patriarchy, they want to eliminate Korean men. The full radical 4B movement wants and has successfully destroyed demographics in Korea. The population is in decline, birth rates are at critical, and they are increasingly, no matter how much money they are offered, they are increasingly demanding the end of Korea. If I was the Korean government, I'd declare them enemies of the state and deport them to North Korea. They'll soon stop. Now, you may think that they have the right, free speech. No. You don't have the right to destroy society. You have the right to destroy yourself, maybe. But society as a whole, to radically, no. Radicals are a threat. And until we reconcile our beliefs, right, this so-called liberal democracy is going to end, right? And this idea that they're ending the all the ills of the world is based on what, right? They are solving nothing, right? They're nothing but doomers. They have condemned an entire generation of men for the actions of a few, right? We punish criminals, but it's not enough for women. They will always want more done. They always want more power, more money, more privileges, right? They demand more time off from work, right? They're unproductive, yet they want more money. The government has increasingly created jobs for women by increasing the number of school teachers, number of government workers, and for what? Increase the debt. They're even less productive, demanding more time off, more pay rises every year, causing nothing but national crisis after national crisis. But in South Korea, there is a backlash, right? And around the world, there's a backlash. In China, lying flat, or let it rot. There are multiple movements now in China. There's anti-feminism around the world. There's mgtow. The manosphere in general, 25% of men around the world are active anti-feminist in some form. mgtow is a growing movement across the world, and more young people are politically active. Now, in Korea, the 2030 movement refers to a group of political movements. They are not singular. Right? These are individuals in their 20s and 30s. A decisive swing vote as the boomers die off. Now, they hate boomers. They see boomers responsible for the debt and many crises facing the day, including feminism. They see feminism as a foreign, bourgeois ideology that for the luxurious, right? While men do the hard work, the women who live ever increasingly luxurious lifestyles engage in more and more activism to protect their privileged positions. And they want those privileges taken away from them, right? If you're a single person in Korea, they want women to pay a tax, right? To pay for their healthcare, to pay for all the problems in society they create, right? Single mothers, no more divorce, right? No more freebies, right? You get divorced, that's it. No more special privileges, right? You're not entitled to someone else's wealth, even if just because you're married to them. So what? You don't want to be with them, but you want their wealth? Yeah, that's yeah. No, I have heard that many states in America are now also being lobbied to get rid of the current divorce laws. We'll look at that in another video. But increasingly, men say that right, there's a hyper-competitive job market and women have an unfair advantage where they are. Conversely, women think the government does not do enough for them. that they are increasingly marginalised and increasingly under threat because the men want to take away their rights. What, their right to kill babies? There. It's always coming down to killing babies, isn't it? The radical feminism movement is killing Korea, right? The 4B movement, the 4 no's, right? The Korean word for no, by, no marriage, by hong, no childbirth, bishung, bushline, sorry, no dating, bi yong yi, and no sex, by shikusu. And of course, this is systematic misandry. Right? They claim it's a protest against gender-based violence, yet they're the ones who murder babies based on gender. They're the ones who attack all men as demons and criminals and blame them for everything. Right? There's no women criminals ever. Right? That men are violent. They need to be re-educated. Right? Right? There's no nuance to feminism, right? It's a evil ideology of blame and victimhood in order to manipulate society into giving them privileges, right? They overinflate everything. But if you look at who's committing the violence, who's committing the violence around the world, who's committing the most of the violence, who, right? They never address the real issues, ever. But economic and institutional organizations are increasingly under attack in Korea. All right. More and more men basically believe that these unicorn projects, as they're called, will not save the Korean economy, that they have to tighten their belts, cut back on foreign aid, increasingly the foreign investment in Korea has done nothing but drain the economy, has not produced any long-term sustainable jobs, right? Says the foreigners are done. They come in, overproduce, and leave, right? It's the same. Why are we supporting North Korea? Let them collapse, let them die, But increasingly, women are more radical, but men now hold the key balance of vote in Korea. And 20 to 30-year-old men, of course, increasingly want traditional values, traditional families. And, of course, this has created a panic because as young women get older and start getting lonely and desperate, and they start suddenly, find themselves giving in to their biological urges, right? They spend their youth idolizing K-pop stars, buying clothes, living off their parents' largesse, but as soon as their parents go out, they don't know what to do. They can't cope, right? These women ever increasingly, and of course in Korea they have all sorts of social problems, so, but women are ever increasingly turned to prostitution. But prostitution in Korea is illegal, but it's also on the decline. But however, prostitution accounts for 1% of the GDP of Korea. So you definitely know, right, that Korean women, by large, are using feminism as a justification, a self-justification for their greed and narcissism, right? You hate men, so you prostitute yourself, right? You want to exploit men on a grand scale, right? You want to deny them a happy life, right? You want to make them miserable and exploit them, right? So you become a prostitute, you become increasingly political active. And of course now the Korean government cracking down on prostitution and saying, well, you can't, you're going to pay taxes, you have to take the risk of jail, and you start spreading diseases, we're going to hit you with fines and put you in prison. So increasingly women prostitution is decreasing also because men are walking away. They're saying, no, we're not interested in you. No, we're not going to be used by you. We're not your piggy bank. So when women say no dating, men go fine. They say no sex, yep, we're not paying you for sex. And suddenly women are screaming, right? Screaming that men are abandoning them, right? Obviously 4B was a shit test. It's gone too far, right? They're so prideful they won't back down, So, yeah, increasingly Korea is going to give women the back of the hand, and metaphorically, not physically. They're going to replace women with robots, right? Increasing robots to take care of the elderly, stop paying... So there goes a lot of jobs for young women, particularly in care industries. And these robots also artificial uterine replicators to replicate the uterus. There has now been 12 successful uterine births in Korea, where they have now these wombs are transplants growing tissue and implanted into older women, who a lot of older women are quite easily and quite happily to get pregnant to a young man, right? Increasingly have someone take care of them, right? And yeah, these young men, they get the baby benefit, they have the job, they have a wife at home who doesn't want to work, right? And yeah, Korean men are looking at whether or not they're actually willing to pay rather to have children, instead of the other way around, paid to have children. And Korean women, bugger them. You're going to pay higher taxes. Your health care, is going to be cut off at 65, I believe, or 75, I forget which. Yeah, when Korea is definitely in someone to look forward to and see how they handle the crisis, how Japan handles their crisis, how Italy handles it, and eventually how women have just written themselves out of the market entirely as more and more men walk away and say, no, we want nothing to do with you. Not physically, not mentally. We're not going to engage with you sexually. Not even romantically. See, that's the problem. Women want romance, not love. They want romance. They want to be romanced over and over again. And this is increasingly fatigued, right? Men have feminist fatigue, right? Because women don't know what they want. When they're young, they want feminism. They want their freedom. They want to swing from vine to vine. And as they get older, they want the big hunky man, to please them in every way. And then once they've burnt out their uterus and can't feel anything between their legs, then they suddenly want to settle down with a real man who's going to take care of them and their collection of half-breeds, All right, so, I'm not saying that every Korean woman chases black men, but increasingly, black men are going to Korea for sex tourism and mostly American, of course. And, again, they say, oh, you can't handle the competition, ha, ha, ha. But it's not. Women are not doing it because black men are better, lovers or whatever. They're doing it to hurt you, right? So men are finding their own way and saying, right, we're not going to fund you. We don't want to, you had a child, it's your responsibility. They want the state to cut them off. They want the state to cut off prostitutes from welfare. And they want women generally to pay a singles tax. Now, Japan's talking about a singles tax too, so is Italy. Now, they're not talking about it for men, right? Men don't decide to get married, right? Women do, right? And men between 20 and 30 are saying no, right? There's laws in Korea now, sexual harassment. And so men are saying, no, I'm not asking a girl out. That's a sex trap. Every time they won't engage in a woman one-on-one. Nope, they open doors. They increasingly go to meetings in groups, college dorms. Men will introduce their date all around to make sure that everybody knows they're having sex. And the girl, of course, can't claim rape. How many false rape claims? Well, Korea's rape crisis suddenly disappeared overnight when men started, parading around their girlfriends and saying, we're having sex now. And, of course, the girl's increasingly embarrassed, but they go home in shame, but they can't call the police and then say, oh, Mr. Rich Man raped me. I want 20,000 yong or prosecute, This is going on for centuries, It's nothing new. Women forcing rich men to take care of them or to pay up. But increasingly, right? You imagine in society if we had body cams. Look what body cams did for police, right? Imagine body cams on politicians. Hey, let's see what they're doing at their meeting with Pfizer. Let's see what the Koreans are doing with their peace talks with North Korea. Are they really peace talks? You'll soon find, right, a lot of honesty suddenly breaking out and a lot of crime suddenly disappearing because the stats cannot be skewed by false allegations. And could you imagine if they brought in consequences for women having falsely claiming children that with a man when it's not theirs? Look at France. They criminalised DNA. Now they tried to do that in Korea. So far, men have blocked that bill and increasingly politically active because they realise the only way to preserve their rights is to make sure when they pass a law that it gives no privilege to women. And it's increasingly frustrating the feminists because they don't have privilege. But yes, so the Korean government's decided to hijack the 2030 movement by creating their own, a government initiative to transform the economy. That by 2030 there will be a global powerhouse once again with 40% increase in productivity. At the same time, they want to cut off coal and decrease the amount of power consumption. You can't increase productivity anymore, right? And you can't use robots if you don't have power, right? Increasingly, the government is torn between pleasing the women and pleasing the men. Ultimately, where's your future? The productive men. Productive men need to assert themselves and and protect their rights. I'm not saying fix society. I'm saying protect your rights. So from cradle to grave, the government cannot conscript you. Because when the government's in crisis, they have a war, right? Many people will tell you now that World War I was a flurry of letters between diplomats plotting and planning who was going to declare war, and eventually France did, right? Under the pretext of Serbia, right? 6 months after the Archduke was killed, right? Germany had sent troops there to quell riots, and France said, well, we have to stand with our socialist brothers. French socialism should have been outlawed and the French president executed for war crimes. Done. But no. Increasingly, the world has been run by cowards, bullies, and supported by sycophants. And feminism is nothing but a sycophantic movement. And it increasingly, basically, women are activists to advertise themselves to millionaires and billionaires. Why? Because millionaires and billionaires play the game. They play the political game, right? They play the system, right? They benefit from the system. NGOs. Look at all the NGOs. Look at all the rich women who have NGOs and funding of feminism. Why do they hate Trump? Because he's cut them all off, hasn't he? Well, it's not just Korea he's cut off. He's making them, he's making them earn it. And what's the last thing feminists want? To earn a living. They want to be paid to merely exist. And they've admitted that. Women have finally admitted that, no, we want to be pampered, we want to be romanced, we want this, that, and the other. And yeah, everybody says, enjoy your cats and enjoy your box wine. And they say, and then they go, oh, kiss kitty. The Helen Merriams of the world go, yes, I enjoy my kitties and my boxed, yeah. But meanwhile, we know, Helen, you've had every major... You forget that all these... Jane Fonda, all these major feminists, right? They've had every rock star, every politician, every British Prime Minister has allegedly been between Helen Mirren's legs, They're not stunning, they're not brave, they're degenerates, and they're psychotic, They don't care who they hurt. They love telling you what vile people they are because they know it hurts you, right? Because they rub it in your face that you didn't get to have me because you're not good enough. No, bitch, Helen Mirren, you weren't good enough. Just because you had Peter O'Toole put 2 fingers in your twat and a third one in your butt during the movie Caligula, and then you went on to pomp and dump every British Prime Minister you could get your hands on, doesn't make you a special person. Makes you a right tart. Worthless. You're worthless, right? You're a gutter crawl, right? You're nothing but a gutter crawl. You're a sex toy, like a disposable sex toy, like Jane Fonda, right? Jane Fonda, you won the Academy Award, big deal. So you patted yourself on the back, big deal, right? You got paid millions of dollars in the movie, congratulations. I didn't pay to see your movies, thank God. Yeah, and increasingly, men, walk in your own way. I am asking, not telling, that if you really want to make a difference on your way out, stop supporting Hollywood. Stop supporting big sports. Support the individual artists who you like, but remember, they can turn on you, like Bad Bunny, right? When he was a lonely, desperate Spanish rapper, he was a very nice man. Says he got rich and famous, sold his soul. He got the Super Bowl ads, didn't he? Right? People didn't come to watch Bad Bunny. They watched the Super Bowl because they thought, oh, no Kelsey, oh, all the drama, let's see. And there was big disappointment. After halftime show was over, most people tuned out. But too bad, too sad, so late. 230 million tuned in. But 20 million didn't, which means they lost potential audience. So it's not the big win they think of, having Bad Bunny. And, they're all trying to cope and see by going, record, record, record. Yeah, but it's a growing international audience. You sold it to an international audience cheaply, right, to get the viewership. So you shut yourself in the foot anyway. And it's like the Korean feminists. They shut themselves in the foot. Everything they asked for, the Korean men said, yep, okay. And now that they have no sex, no dating, and now they're facing higher taxes and no possibility of men wanting to take care of them and not wanting to hire them, right? They're pushing for meritocracy so they can say, well, I don't want to hire this bitch. So, increasingly feminists and, of course, men in Korea, when a woman attacks them, they attack them back so they can't be accused of sexual assault, because physical assault, 3 to 6 months, sexual assault, 10 to 20 years. Which would you take? Yeah, I'd punch a woman in the face. If she hit me, that's it. It's game on. I'd rather go to jail for the physical assault than go to jail for the accusation of sexual assault. Because, don't forget, as we're constantly reminded, South Korea is a nice feminist government for now, but it's increasingly right-wing, just like Japan. Look at Japan. They now have a clear mandate, and they're getting drawing up new laws. Hopefully they will start listening to the Japanese men for a change and return to Japanese meritocracy and actually free exchange of the currency instead of controlling the currency just to appease everybody else. Just like Korea, their problems are trying to appease everybody with all these trade deals. Fuck Europe. Europe doesn't care. They just want to bleed everybody dry and then cry and say, America, please defend us. Yeah. No. Europe, no. Get rid of feminists. Send all the harem melons to the Middle East. Let them suffer, right? Go to North Africa for sex tourism. Don't come back, bitch. Go to Ghana. Yep, one-way trip. Tear up your British passport. Stay there, bitch. Bye. Yeah, married woman travelling singly to African country. Okay, tear up their passport. Bye. Yeah. Fuck them. Stop caring, right? Stop caring, because they don't care about you, right? I know it's heartbreaking, but for 25% of the world, we've woken up to that fact, and the more who do, right, you just have to, most men only have to wait them out, right? The world would be a better place without these feminists, right? They provide you nothing, right? What do? Secretaries, all these school teachers. We don't need half as many school teachers as we've got. Store clerks? Go through them all. You could close half the female stores. There goes most of your credit card debt. And there goes the national debt with it, because how many women pay their credit card debt? And that goes on to the banks claiming on the insurance, bank insurance and loan defaults, right? Young women don't care if they go bankrupt. They just rock up their local sports bar and says, who wants to pay my car payments? Who wants to pay my rent? Now, I don't want to go into personal stories, but I've had people tell me that horror stories of relationships and how they thought that, it was their duty, they had to endure. But people my age are no longer enduring. And young people, they're looking at the older generations, they've seen what women have done to their fathers, and they're torn between liking their mother, which is a hard thing not to do, right? It's very hard. And I don't blame you if you still love your mother, even if she treated your father like shit. But you got to remember, these feminists, they don't care about you, right? They want you to be their son husband, to do all the things that, to do all the things around the house, to take care of mummy, while they wine and dine their friends and whine about society. I mean, who wants to live in a miserable world where you have to listen to nothing but natter and quiet, my period. Oh, my husband was a dick. He couldn't satisfy me. Oh, he's tiny. My husband was... And did you see the store clerk? The best on board and all these things, when they go on cruise. They go around saying, who's the best on board? And they go and line up at his, at his door. I mean, why should you endure that when you can have a glorious life with your hobbies, right? Men, wargaming, video gaming. Just because feminists have ruined AAA gaming, there's lots of old games, wargaming. I'm making an RPG. I write. I have a few anime figures that bring me a little joy to my life. I do videos with streaming a few. I do stuff, right? And I don't miss, right? I do not miss my ex-wives. I don't miss them, right? Why should I care about them? When you realise that your freedom and your sanity, you can understand why Korean men are walking away in larger numbers than everybody else. And why, right, they can bring the government to their knees. Right? Because ultimately, men, if they don't show up for work, what are they going to do? Have women build their ships? Women run their factories? No. Getting rid of all the men in schools. The men in Korea, they're now saying, where's all the male teachers? Where's the 50-50? Where's the quota? You're talking about equality. Where's the 50%? Where's the representation? Women are panicking because men are going after their privileged jobs and saying, well, if there's 100 school teachers, 50 should be men. And that is panicking women the most. Because for far too long, men have stopped critical thinking. But the younger generations have. Now, I'm not saying every man, but I'm just saying the majority of men have laid down for far too long. Yeah, Gen X, we had no political power. The boomers were the majority. They crunched us every time, all the way through to Reagan, all the way through to Clinton, right? Boomers, boomers, and look what they did in the 80s, transferred all their wealth to the, straight to up-and-coming millennials. They just basically, Gen X, Gen Y, the lost generations, who did all the up-and-coming work but never got to rise to management, or most of us, until boomers started dying off. But then it's too late. Boomers have done all the economic damage, and they only promote, and it's promotion through nepotism. So there's no merit, right? Look at all the companies. Instead of promoting your Gen X Americans, they're bringing in Indians to protect their liberal democracy. And this is what Koreans are fighting. So when you hear about what little you hear about Korea, remember there's a lot of disinformation out there, but Korean men are fighting the battles that we're going to have to fight too. All right, just to protect our rights. No, we're not fighting for some political cause, just to protect our rights, to say, no, you can't take our jobs. Where's our representation? And beat them at their own game, because ultimately women are not logical, they're emotional, and they just increasingly want privileges. Take them away. Let them be the unemployed. Let them be the ones replaced by robots. Let them figure out what to do when AI takes all the lawyers, medical professional jobs. Because you think about it, right? Where logic is the most important, where critical data analysis is the most important, and high speed, whether it's law, teaching, engineering, all your comfort jobs can be replaced by AI faster, cheaper, and easier in the long run. And ultimately, once they get the accuracy problem sorted out, once they get the personality sorted out, and the biggest thing running right now is AI toys, where men are increasingly turning to artificial women for companionship. And women, again, want sex robots outlawed, want artificial wombs outlawed, because men are increasingly, particularly in Korea, have shown interest in buying an offspring, right? Saying, yeah, oh, look, all these older ladies want to be paid to have a baby. No worries. No fuss, no fuss, no muss. So those who want a family can have a family without the burden, right? And have a nice little robot to take care of their children and give their son all the advantages that they didn't get because, mummy was too busy, gambling and drinking, Koreans' favorite pastimes, for unemployed women. And of course, increasingly, prostitution. Until recently, prostitution is in the decline now. So whether you think, you can go your own way or not, that is up to you. But I am giving you the facts, letting you decide how you deal with it, because that ultimately, we are not a political movement, right? We're not here to tell you, I am running for office, here's all my promises, because I don't know what promises I can keep. No politician does, right? Every election's a gamble. Increasingly, political parties are increasingly stagnant because of the inertia in government, particularly the inert earth that is the civil service, who should all be fired, right? I should have the right, if I'm elected, I'll fire the civil service and watch them all vote. Well, they've all voted for the opposition anyway, but watch them rig the election because they count the votes. That's no conflict of interest there, is there? So, thank you all. I really appreciate it. I think the Koreans are teaching us valuable lessons that we should pay attention to, and what little there is, take it with a grain of salt. That Korean men right now the front line, but it will ever change. It'll be Japan, Thailand, China, right? We're seeing it with Iran, right? We're seeing the counter-revolution of young men in Iran against Islam. We're seeing the fear in Saudi Arabia that if the Iranian regime falls, that anti-Islam will spread throughout the Middle East, and there goes their influence, right? There goes, they've war profiteered for the last 70 years, right? Ever increasingly money into BlackRock into war, and controlled speculation where they know when there's a war going to break out, and they've bought they go in and buy up all the assets for the companies that collapsed, right? That's why companies left China. China's bankrupt, right? There's no physical currency to be had. China's not repatriating money to pay workers, which would then go on to consumer goods, which is why the economy is stalling. China's trying to buy up as much as they can, and they're stockpiling for war, which is how most world economies crash, right? It's how the Great Depression really happened, right? America and other countries started stockpiling steel, stopped trading goods, and of course the economies ground to a halt, didn't they? And then since they ground to a halt, Roosevelt came along and said, okay, minimum wage, you're all now soldiers and factory workers. You go make tanks and aircraft and battleships. What war? Shut up and just go do it. And 3 years later, there's a war. Ta-da! What a miracle. And, of course, the same thing's happening again. This time, you can't blame Trump. This was planned, put into action for years, decades in the making. Same with World War II. It's decades in the making. So, World War I, decade in the making. Right? They've been pushing for war in Europe since the 1800s. And again, they're pushing war. You look at all the people, though, who are pushing for it. None of them will fight it. It's like in Korea. None of these women all these women who want North Korea, they think North Korea is going to give them all the exciting government jobs. So nice and safe, government housing and all. Do they know exactly how North Korea sustains its population? Do they know what they do to women who even deviate 1 millimeter off ideology? And if you say no, yeah, you don't say no the second time. It's a rifle butt to the face. You say no, bang, straight to the face. Now, some don't do it, of course. Some not all North Koreans are like that, but yeah, you basically facing a idiotic ideology that's just self-destructive. They destroy freedom for the sake of their comfort, thinking that they'll be rewarded. That's all around the world. This ideology, they don't learn. Liberalism hasn't learned from the collapse of every civilization they've ever infested. Whether it be Rome, Britain, you name it. Liberalism has destroyed almost every culture. China. So you can understand why Koreans who have learnt from their history don't want a meritless society. They do not want quotas. They do not want a feminist society. And they do not want a dead society. And I don't think most men out there do either. Now, of course, they will. Of course, the government will turn to sperm banks and artificial means to sustain their populations. America, of course, has been hiding its decline since the 1960s through mass migration. But as Europe's so many young people left Europe that they don't have enough people there to breed, so Europe started replacing its population. But eventually, you look at the rise of, eventually South America will be 50% European and about 25% African. Their populations, ironically, of Europeans are still healthy, young, and having children. It's the natives who aren't having children. And it's the Africans who are increasingly heading to South America because they can't get into America. The world, of course, is being colonized by India, Africa, and China, but that too will change. But one of the things driving the 23rd movement, before I go, is anti-China, anti-communism, and anti-feminism. So there are things we can agree on, look upon, and learn from the political arguments, if we can find some, because don't forget, there's a lot of suppression about Korean news and Korean politics. So anybody out there know a Korean and has information, is willing to share information, please let them know. I am interested. Thank you. And thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. Really appreciate you all. Can you now throw us a little bit of support on Ko-Fi? Join my Patreon for RPG Patreon for $1 a month, or buy my books, buy my merch. All my links in the link tree description below, in my profile, or scan the QR code on the screen. Appreciate you, nation. Everyone, see you in the next video, and bye for now.